So the other day I was just hanging out, thinking about heading down to the Toshi station to pick up some power converters, when all of a sudden I received a message. The message was hidden on a droid from the Studson system. And here it is.
Achuta Eric Hobby Bunky Dunko, Dawajo Choipoda Kelida Junkie. I've noticed your deep love of sand and thought who better than Eric to join a sand-based event. Anyway, please join my Podracer or I'll feed you to the Sarlacc. Bye.
Well, this sounds pretty cool. This is right up my alley. This is pod racing. Welcome back to Eric's Hobby Workshop. In this episode, we're building a pod racer. Scratch building the engines, custom sculpting the pilot, and then putting it all together. So let's head to the dollar store, pick up some supplies, and let's start crafting. Alright, and we are back in the workshop. I think this peppercorn grinder is going to be the perfect shape for my engines. So peel the plastic off that bad boy, pop the cap, and isn't that beautiful? Now there are two of them. So I have this older salt shaker as well, and I figure this can be the other side of it. So I start pulling on it to no avail. I tried clippers. I really tried clippers, tried them real hard. And at last I decided to just go for my craft hammer and just blast that thing apart with some precision strikes. But it's still not out of the actual piece itself, so that was completely foolish. At this point I'm at a bit of a loss as to, oh, got it. Nice. So my original intention was to use this lighter here and make a real functional blue flame pod racer, which would have been pretty cool, but it also would have been super dangerous. So I scrapped that idea. Now with this little toy, I'm going to use my Dremel tool, carve a little hole, and this is going to become the cockpit of the pod itself. I have this little golden seat from a construction toy, and that'll fit right in there nicely just like that. I use a 2-part epoxy adhesive. This stuff totally rocks for gluing plastic together because it dries super hard. And that's basically it. That's how I made my pod. So I was thinking about what I was going to do for the pilot, and I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a Celestin, like the Num, who's Lando's co-pilot in Return of the Jedi. And the reason why is because, for one, I've always liked this guy. I've liked the look of his face. It's very Star Wars. It's very funny. It's kind of like half Muppet, half like Uncanny Valley, grotesque sort of thing. Right up my alley. And the other thing is, I noticed most of the pod racers in the race in the Phantom Menace movie are diminutive. They're built like jockeys, you know? And Yen Yum's kind of a smaller guy. And also his face is really big. So if I was going to sculpt something, it's a little bit more forgiving the proportions to have that big mask thing that he's wearing. So I don't really know what I'm doing here, but let's give it a shot. I start with some Super Sculpey and make some tiny little balls that are going to be the eyeballs of this bad boy. Next, I come in with a bit of wire and make an armature for what's going to be the pilot's legs. When I have that in place, I put a little bit more Sculpey on there to bulk out the shape of his pants. And when I'm reasonably happy with that, I test fit it in the cockpit and then give it a little bit of a bake to harden it up. Next, I'm going to switch over to 2-part green stuff. This stuff is really good for sculpting if you have a new tube of it. I had one that I've been using for about 10 years and it was all grainy and I thought I was just a really bad sculptor. Turns out I'm not that bad of a sculptor, I just had old putty. So anyways, I'm going to sculpt the head around a little nail that I'm holding in this little contraption here. And then I'm going to put some Sculpey over top of a little dot of green stuff. The idea here is the green stuff will stick to the nail and the Sculpey will stick to the green stuff. Why am I mixing putties? Because I have no idea what I'm doing. So here you have my little baked eyes, which are hard, going into the soft putty. And that's going to be the big luminous eyes of my pilot. Beautiful. Looking good. Next, I'm going to flesh out the armature on the arms of this guy with some green stuff. Personal trainers hate this one simple trick for adding mass to your arms. And with this piece all baked up, I put some green stuff over to act as his face, and then basically cut his eyelids out to define the eyes underneath, scraping away the putty so you can see his eyes. Then I can start sculpting away and have those eyes peeking out underneath. This actually worked pretty well. Give him a little chin. These silicone sculpting tools are really helpful and useful for this. And he's starting to come together. This is really satisfying, sculpting a guy's face from scratch. With one tiny little adjustment, you can really change the facial expression to get it exactly as you want it, but you can also totally ruin it with one slip of your hand, so it's kind of nerve-wracking too. But yeah, I'll give him a little hat. Celestins have this little combat helmet thing. It's kind of iconic, so put that bad boy on there. Next I'm going to use this little ATV thing and take that apart with a screwdriver because I want these handlebars. And I cut the handles off the handlebars and drill holes in them. And then with a little bit of wire, I'm going to stick those handles onto the wire, bend those wires into place, and make two nice little pod controls for my little pilot to go in there. Nice and snug. Beautiful. I sculpt some hands around the handlebars. Didn't really do a great job with the hands. He kind of looks like he was stung by a bee on the back of his hand, but that's neither here nor there. And with my head done, I clipped the nail short to make a little peg, fit that in, and there he is. Pretty pleased with that. Let's work on the engines. So obviously I want to remove the peppercorns from inside the pepper shaker before I start building. So I cut a hole in the bottom and then pour those into a little Ziploc bag for, I guess, an extremely peppery recipe down the line. But then I fit my salt shaker bit onto the bottom, and I've already got the basic shape in place. Pretty pleased with how that looks. Next I'm going to use these little party favorite jets that I also got from the dollar store. I'm going to trim the wing off and then clip that weird sticky outy bit off, and then trim down the back with my Dremel tool to get a nice interesting shaped piece that I can use some 2-part epoxy to glue to the side and give the entire engine a bit more of an interesting shape, and you end up with something like this. Yeah, pretty nice. At this point I realized there's a peppercorn or two still in there, and that you can actually use these engines as a pepper shaker too, and that's just a bonus. It's time to greeble this thing. Start by cutting off the pieces and test fitting them on to the various places where I think they might look good. Then with a little bit of hot glue, I'm going to add this piece to the inside. That's where the lightning's going to be coming out that keeps the pods together. Nice. I kind of like how it's clear right now. Gives it an interesting thing. I drill a hole in these little front bits to add my wires, and that's going to be strong enough to support the cockpit and support the pods if I do it properly. And this was pretty finicky, moving these wires around, but eventually I got them to sort of stand up on their own in a way that I'm pretty happy with. And once you put the pod on the top there, it supports itself. Alright, that needs a little bit of work, but you can see the concept. I bent up some wires to act as the lightning for the energy couplers, and I test fit those inside, but I'm not going to glue it yet because even though this looks wicked, I still want to add a lot of detail to my pods. So here's a cool technique. Make a little rope of green stuff, and then with a comb, if you run the comb over top of it, you can get a nice little textured conduit or power cable. I'm just going to lay that on there. It should stick well enough to this thing without any glue. But if it falls off, it falls off. What can you do? This little pistol that came in one of these kits, I'm going to clip the handle off it to make it just kind of an interesting little blocky bit, and then glue some styrene rod to it just to add some detail. A little piece of wire and some hollow styrene rods that I cut into semicircles, and that'll add another piece of wiring on there. I really want this thing to be crusted with detail that makes it look like it's exposed machinery part of this engine. Another good way to do this is to cut some little guns. You can see that one there works as a nice little piece. And a few bits of square cardboard adds some little panel type details as well. Pretty easy, pretty cool. Nice. Next I'll glue those lightning bits on with epoxy. And then I got this base at Michael's. It's like this sort of a pine thing. I didn't really know how to attach it, so I nailed a piece of cardboard down, which, you know, if it works, what are you going to do? It worked. And it's, you know, decently stable, so let's go with that. Time to prime it. I spray it with black spray paint. I'm just using Games Workshop brand here because I'm out of everything else, and then I hit it with a little bit of silver. So as I was doing this, there were some birds chirping on the camera, and I thought it would be cool to slow the birds down to 10% speed and see what they sounded like. And I wish I hadn't done that. But can I just say, this thing is looking so sick, and I'm super happy with it. I'm not going to bore you with the painting process because it's nothing special, but I am going to mask off the metal parts because I do want to add some color. So I didn't know what color to paint this thing, but luckily I have a chance cube. Maybe we roll for it. Yellow. We're going yellow. So I hit that with a bit of the old Krylon, and that's looking pretty cool, but it's too new looking. Next I came in and added some carbon scoring and dents and streaks and grime with, I don't know, black paint and stuff. Maybe I used some Nuln Oil or something, I don't really remember. But I came in with a bit of kitchen scrubber, and this was able to add some nice little microchips and some scratches. Painted that cable black. And then I decided to do the base with some of this Geeks Gaming modeling compound. I've seen a lot of people use this. Mix it up to a cottage cheese-like consistency, add a little bit of paint, and just start smearing that on the base, getting nice and dirty. And once it was already started to set, I realized I wanted to have a little bit of relief on the base, so I glued some bark pieces on there with some construction adhesive, and then I patched up the top with modeling compound. I added some base-ready glue. And that brings us to my favorite part of the video, when we get to add a little bit.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy, and a cunning warrior.
I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Good friend. A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
Right about me.
Sand. We're gonna add some sand. And sand is one of our last steps. After we add the sand, I'm just gonna paint the base rim black. And then I'm going to come in a little bit with some light wash to lighten up the color of the sand a little bit, and that's it. By the way, guys, make sure you go check out the other guys in this collaboration. Studson from Studson Studios, we got Bill from Bill Making Things, we got Scratch Bashing, and we got Boyle Hobby Time all involved. And they all have their different strengths, and it's pretty tight that we have such a star-studded cast of pod racing makers, so go check them out. I will link their channels down in the description in case your search bar is broken or something like that. Okay. So while the credits roll, I'd really like to thank all my patrons for their support. My Mastercrafter patrons, Robert Reisholt, Joseph Hobbs, Stephen Scott, Paypig69, Nadia Hamdi, Mike Huey, Alice Ferraris, and Lichlord Zom. And all my new patrons, Scooty Too Fruity, Terrain for Print, Bjorn Ritzel, George Sheridan, Sean Leslie, Deanna Miller, Brian Pitts, Judgmental Seagull, and Joe Policones, and James Moffat. Thank you guys all for your support. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.